Hi, Lynn Barrette here, licensed clinical therapist and spiritual counselor, and we are on part 3 of our series on forgiveness and how to walk through a forgiveness need in a way that's acceptable and realistic and palatable to us. Forgiveness is not always easy, as I'm sure you know. If you're watching this video, you probably have attempted some form of forgiveness or another. And so you know that it can be difficult. So in this series, we've walked through what forgiveness is not, that it's not sticking our head in the sand and pretending like nothing happened and trying to go on as if nobody has done anything to us or as if we haven't done anything that we need to learn from. So that's not what forgiveness is. And forgiveness is acceptance, accepting the facts of a situation, accepting what has happened as a reality that has happened, that we can't go back and change it. But then it's also compassion for ourselves, compassion for the other person, taking a moment to step into somebody else's shoes to see where they possibly could be coming from, what circumstances they're coming from, what issues they might be coming from. We don't always know that, but we can be willing to look at the situation from somebody else's perspective. Whether or not we agree is a whole different story. And then releasing the bitterness, releasing any resentment that we may be holding about the situation, and being able to choose that acceptance and compassion as our reality rather than the pain and the resentment. So that's kind of what we've covered so far. And in this video, I'm talking to you about some methods that are helpful in that forgiveness process. It'd be nice if we could just say, okay, I'm just going to forgive that person, and then ta-da, it's done, right? Then we are there and we don't have to think about it again. But that's not how we work as human beings, unfortunately. Sometimes we can do that. If it's a minor thing, we can go, okay, yeah, whatever, blow it off and move on. But when it's a deeper forgiveness need that tends to come up over and over again, we need to spend a little time and effort in that healing process. Okay, so in one of my articles on one of these videos, I talked about how when we have a pain in our body, when we have a wound in our bodies know how to heal those wounds, and our bodies naturally, without us having to think about it, work 24/7 to heal that wound. And while we are capable emotionally and psychologically and neuroscientifically able to heal, our brains are able to heal, a lot of times that healing takes more conscious effort on our part. So what can we do when it comes to a forgiveness need, a healing need that requires us to forgive and move forward? We need to spend a little extra conscious effort to help that healing process versus our bodies kind of do them without us having to think about it. So one of the methods that I have used for over 2 decades for myself, whether it's a forgiveness need or just moving from one life situation to another, is something called the 7 Steps for Successful Life Transitions that was taught to me by my spiritual mentor, Jane Elizabeth Hart, who's the founder and spiritual leader for Center for Enlightenment. And I'm going to leave all those links in the comments or the description section below so that you can check it out further. And also I'm going to leave a link for the process that I'm about to tell you about. The 7 Steps for Successful Life Transitions. There's another tweak to that process called 7 Steps for Moving Through Difficulties that I like to use for a forgiveness need. So that's what I'm going to talk about. This is a 7-step journaling process. It's a structure for us to use to place our experience in kind of a machine to move us through all those different steps that I've talked about so far, of acceptance and dealing with the facts, getting everything out on the table, and also that compassion piece and the release piece. It's all of those steps are encompassed in the 7-step process. So it starts with a step called disappointments and difficulties. And I'm going to just hold up the worksheet here that I'm going to leave a link for in the description. So you can see there are 7 steps, and each step has journaling questions. And the first step is disappointments and difficulties, and this is where we get to get out on the table all of the difficult responses, the difficult facts of the situation. We get to just write about it, and get it out all on the table. That's dealing with the facts. The second step is unfulfilled hopes and missed opportunities. It's also called hopes and dreams. I, being kind of an earthy person, like to rename that as the step of expectations, because that's a little more earthier of a word for me. So to help me with my journaling process. So the questions are based around, what did I expect from the situation? How did I expect the other person to really behave? How did I expect myself to behave? How do I wish I would have responded instead of maybe how I did respond? So it just gives us an opportunity to analyze the situation, to analyze what happened in the situation, and how do I feel about it? How did I feel about it at the time? How do I feel about it now? What is still frustrating? What am I holding on to? And each of these steps has questions to help draw that forth so that we can deal with it and move on. The third step is the step of forgiveness, which when I'm working with clients or in classes, I like to call this the step of acceptance, because it is that piece of, I accept that this happened, and I'm willing to look at what's left over that's difficult for me. One of the questions is, why is it hard for me to forgive? What's the hardest thing for me to forgive about the situation? And what would happen if I don't forgive? What an interesting question. What would happen if I don't forgive this? If I don't forgive this situation, do I get to, hey, wonderful, carry this around for the rest of my life, and let it come up over and over again, because that's what emotional pain does. It comes up over and over again until we resolve it. So it just gives us an opportunity to look at, hey, what am I getting out of holding on to this unforgiveness and this resentment? So it's just a little reality check for us as we go forth. The next 2 steps, the 4th step and the 5th step, are steps about the good things about the situation. Not always, but oftentimes we get into situations with other people from a positive perspective. Maybe it's a coworker and we were really excited about them at first, but then they did something to hurt us, or relationships are like this all the time. If it's a parent or a sibling or a child or a relative of any kind, or a romantic relationship, any kind of relationship, a friendship, we get together in those situations, in those relationships, and oftentimes there's something beautifully positive. There are lots of things beautifully positive about the situation, even if it ended up difficultly. So we want to acknowledge those good things too, because that gives us a balanced perspective. Looking at the positive things about the relationship helps us with that compassion piece of forgiveness that I talked about in the last video. That when we can put ourselves in another person's shoes, we're a lot more willing to let something go. When we're able to see the positive about somebody else, it's easier to forgive. It's easier to take a step back and look at the whole picture, rather than looking at the experience from that perspective of only of the pain around it and the resentment. So those 2 steps are important. And I've worked with this process for over 20 years. And there are times when the only positive thing I can come up with is, hey, I am grateful for this opportunity to work on this, because it pushed my buttons and there's something for me to see around that. And if that's the only positive thing I can come up with for those 2 steps, awesome, because those aren't the steps. Those good things aren't the things that keep us stuck, right? It's the difficulties that keep us stuck. It's the difficulties that need a little bit more attention when we're working to resolve them than the good things. So it's okay. It's okay if we get to that step and we think, okay, I don't have anything really to write here, but we can be grateful for the opportunity to be working on this healing for ourselves. Then the last 2 steps, the 6th step and the 7th step, are around release and completion. And I'm not going to go into those steps because you can see them on the worksheet. But this is a wonderful, structured process to plug our feelings into after something has happened, and we're trying to work on that forgiveness. It's just a step-by-step process. Now, some people I've worked with don't like the structure of the 7 steps. It just doesn't resonate with them, and that's okay. And what I will tell those people is to write a letter to the other person, even if it's yourself. Write a letter just talking about how you feel about what happened. And this is a letter, of course, that you don't send. And you probably have heard this many times over. Write a letter to the person and just don't send it. Throw it away. But what you're doing when you take time to write that letter is you are getting out all those things that are covered in the 7 steps, but it's more free-flowing, it's a little less structured, and some people relate with that better. So you got to kind of pick and choose what resonates with you, and kind of go from there. Maybe even try out both ways, and see which one helps you come to that point of being able to accept what has happened, to be able to have an overall picture of compassion for yourself and whoever else is involved, and be able to release that resentment and the emotional pain around the situation. That's what the goal is. So however you get there is awesome. But these are 2 ways that I use a lot in my classes and with my clients that have been very, very helpful. Another way you can approach that is through art therapy. And I'm not talking about, Bob Ross kind of stuff, right? I'm talking about when I do that for myself, and I've walked through the situation where I've taken colored pencils and blank pieces of paper and just drawn out how I feel about the situation. Now, it's not going in an art museum anywhere, because I am like stick figure artistry here. That's all I got. So, but I turn the lights down low enough so that I can't see what colors I'm choosing. I can't really see and evaluate with my critical mind what I'm drawing, and I just let it out. Other people will close their eyes while they're drawing to get the same effect, because what we want when we're doing any kind of process like that is to turn off that analytical mind and just let the feelings out. We're not going to marinate in those feelings. We're not going to hang out with them. We're not even going to necessarily keep our journaling notes around. We don't need to. Once we've processed something, we can get rid of those notes. We've done it. We don't have to reevaluate it. If it comes up again, we need to be journaling in a whole new way than we did the time before. We don't have to keep that. So whatever we can do to just allow those feelings and that experience to flow forth and get all out on the table so that we can make peace with it and let it go. That's what we're looking for. So these are a few different ways to approach your forgiveness process, but it does take time. It does take setting aside some specific time and effort to work with that in order for it to be a deep and lasting healing when it comes to those situations where that we can't just go, oh, I forgive them, no big deal, but where we need to do a little bit of extra work. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to send me a message, leave it in the comments below. I'll be happy to respond to you. This is a very important topic. It brings up a lot of stuff for people, so let's work with it. Let's embrace it and realize that healing forgiveness need is a necessary part of our personal and spiritual growth. So let's just get real with it. And that's what this series has been about. So I hope it's been helpful. And again, I'd love to hear your questions and your comments. And thanks for watching.